One of the most common relational mistakes people make is this. They confuse shared environment with shared depth. That confusion creates a great deal of disappointment. People assume that because they are in the same room, they are in the same relationship. Because they serve in the same setting, they assume a similar level of connection. Because they move in the same social or spiritual environment, they assume trust, depth, and mutuality are already present. But they are not. A circle is not a covenant. And that distinction matters because many relationships are overestimated at the level of context. People often attach meanings to relationship that the relationship itself has not yet justified. The result is misclassification. And misclassification is one of the great engines of disappointment. So this conversation is really about relational categories. What is a circle? What is a tribe? What is a friendship? And why does it matter to know the difference? Let us start with the circle. A circle is a shared environment of repeated contact. That is the simplest useful definition. A circle is created by proximity, reoccurrence, and common setting. A church can be a circle. A team can be a circle. A department can be a circle. A social cluster can be a circle. A serving context can be a circle. A professional environment can be a circle. A circle tells you who is around. It does not tell you by itself who is aligned, who is trustworthy, who is emotionally safe, who shares your values at depth, who can actually sustain real friendship. That is where people go wrong. They read too much into the environment. They assume the circle is already answered the questions that only time, discernment, and tested pattern can answer. But a circle only establishes nearness. It does not establish depth. It only establishes contact. It does not establish covenant. And that is why a circle is not a covenant. Covenant implies something more serious than repeated presence. It implies tested responsibility, weight, intentionality, some degree of recognized mutual obligation. It is not a casual category. So when a person mistakes a circle for covenant, they begin expecting covenantal outcomes from non-covenantal relationships. They expect loyalty where there has only been familiarity. They expect depth where there has only been repeated exposure. They expect instinctive understanding where there's only been shared setting. That is not wisdom. That is overreading the environment. Now let us go deeper into why this mistake is so common. One of the reasons people overread circles is because circles create emotional shorthand. Repeated exposure creates a false sense of depth. Shared routine creates an impression of solidity. Mutual visibility creates the feeling of being known. And when all of that is intensified by spiritual atmosphere, people begin to assume the relationship has already answered questions it had never really actually been tested on. That is why circles can be misleading. A circle can make you feel connected before you are understood. It can make you feel included before you are safe. It can make you feel relationally anchored before anything has actually been proven. And if a person is underformed in identity, they will often overvalue the circle because the circle gives fast emotional meaning. It gives them a place, a rhythm, a visibility, a felt sense of inclusion. But inclusion is not the same as relational precision. That is why some of the greatest relational disappointments do not begin in hostility. They begin in assumption. People assume the circle has already produced trust when it has only produced familiarity. They assume the environment has already produced depth when it has only produced recurrence. They assume shared context has already produced friendship when it has only produced access. And if those assumptions are left unexamined, the disappointment is almost inevitable. This is why discernment matters so much, because the circle gives contact, not conclusion. A circle gives contact. It does not give conclusion. It gives you exposure to people. It does not tell you what category they belong in. It gives you data. It does not give you interpretation. It gives you nearness. It does not give you meaning. That is the work of discernment. This is where many people become passive. They let the environment do the naming for them instead of asking, what is the relationship actually proving itself to be? They allow shared space to answer on its behalf. That is lazy discernment. A mature person does not let the circle do all the interpretive work. They watch, they test, they notice pattern. They ask what remains outside the setting, what deepens under pressure, what disappears when convenience is removed, what survives without constant environmental reinforcement. That is how clarity is built. Now let us move on to tribe. A tribe is not the same as a circle. A tribe is not merely a group of people who gather in the same place. It is a deeper category of resonance. A tribe usually involves shared codes, shared instincts, shared values, shared appetite, and often a recognizable alignment in direction, burden, or interpretive posture. Put simply, a circle is organized by proximity. A tribe is recognized by resonance. That is the distinction. You can be in the same circle as people and not be of the same tribe. That happens all the time. People attend the same church, serve in the same ministry, join the same network, or occupy the same social cluster and still do not share the same inner language, seriousness, appetite, or sense of movement. That does not make either party false. It simply means shared environment is not the same as shared relational architecture. A tribe is usually discovered in the level of recognition that exists between people, not shallow similarity, but deeper coherence. There is often a recognizable congruence in how they process, value, build, and move. So again, the circle gives nearness, the tribe reveals resonance. But even tribe can be romanticized if people are not careful. People often say, find your tribe, as if a tribe simply means people who like what you like, laugh when you laugh, or mirror your aesthetic. That is too shallow. Tribe is more structural than that. It has more to do with alignment in burden, seriousness, appetite, pace, and interpretive posture than it does with social taste. A tribe often understands your language without requiring endless explanation. There is a form of recognitional coherence there. They do not simply tolerate your mode of thought, they recognize it. They do not simply stand near your burden, they understand its weight. They do not simply enjoy your company, they are often built to move in related directions. That is why tribe can feel like recognition, not just familiarity. But even here, precision is needed. Tribe is not automatically friendship in the most personal sense. A person may be of your tribe and still not be of your closest or safest friends. They may share your codes and direction without sharing your inner life at depth. They may resonate strongly with your way of seeing and moving without necessarily occupying a place of tested relational stewardship. So again, categories matter. Now let us move on to friendship. Friendship is different again. Friendship is not simply shared environment, and it is not automatically identical to tribe. Friendship is a relational category marked by trust, mutual regard, tested care, and some degree of safe stewardship. That last phrase matters. Safe stewardship. A friend is not merely someone who is often around you. A friend is someone who demonstrates a capacity to handle your humanity with care, honesty, and consistency. Friendship is not proved by atmosphere. It is proved by pattern. That is where many people become disappointed. They use friend as a label for people who are actually just in their circle. Or they use friend for people who share social ease or contextual familiarity without any real tested depth. That is how category confusion develops. And once category confusion develops, emotional overinvestment often follows. So let us make the distinction plain. A circle is a context of repeated contact. A tribe is a structure of deeper resonance. A friendship is a tested relationship of mutual regard and stewardship. A covenant is a weightier level of recognized relational seriousness and obligation. There are no interchangeable terms here. Once you collapse them into each other, you create problems for yourself. You start expecting friendship from the circle. You start expecting covenant from the tribe. You start expecting depth from people who were only ever contextually near. And then when the relationship fails to produce what you assumed was there, you feel wounded by something that may never have been present in the form you imagined. This is why naming matters. The wrong name creates the wrong expectation, and the wrong expectation creates avoidable pain. Now let us sharpen this in the context of faith communities. Within church environments especially, circles are often intensified by shared spiritual atmosphere. People worship together, pray together, serve together, plan together, fast together, and engage in repeated sacred environments. That can create a powerful sense of closeness very quickly. But spiritual atmosphere accelerates familiarity. It does not eliminate the need for discernment. That is one of the key points. Shared spiritual context can make people feel more relationally known than they actually are. It can generate emotional nearness before relational categories have been properly examined. That is one reason people can become deeply confused in church spaces. The environment is warm. The language is warm. The repetition is strong. The shared activity is meaningful. but the relationship itself may still be underdefined. So again, the environment must not be overread. A church may be a circle. Within that circle, there may be a tribe. Within that tribe, there may be friendships. Within those friendships, some relationships may prove weightier than others. But none of those categories should be assumed prematurely. That is the work of discernment. Now let us add another layer. Not every circle is meant to become friendship. That needs to be said more often. Some circles are functional. Some are developmental. Some are collaborative. Some are situational. Some are seasonal. Some are simply environments of mutual exposure and contribution. That does not make them meaningless. It simply means they should not be romanticized. One of the reasons people become disappointed is because they assume that if something is meaningful, it must therefore be friendship. That is not true. Association can be meaningful. Collaboration can be meaningful. Shared service can be meaningful. Acquaintance can be meaningful. Community can be meaningful. But meaningful does not automatically mean intimate. Valuable does not automatically mean friendship. Repeated does not automatically mean deep. This is why relational intelligence matters. It helps you appreciate what a relationship is without burdening it with meanings it cannot sustain. Now let us widen the friendship category a little more. Not all friendships look the same. Some friendships are companionate. They are built around warmth, presence, and mutual enjoyment. Some friendships are strategic. They sharpen one another, build one another, and strengthen movement. Some friendships are seasonal and tied to a particular period of growth, burden, or transition. Some friendships are deep and enduring, marked by long-tested loyalty and safe stewardship. These differences matter because sometimes people are disappointed not because a friendship failed, but because they expected one kind of friendship from a relationship that was actually functioning as another. They expected constancy from what was seasonal, depth from what was companionate, counsel from what was merely social, emotional carrying from what was only collaborative. Again, category error. This is why the question is not merely, are we friends? The more intelligent question is, what kind of friendship is this? What has it actually proven itself to be? What is its structure? What can it sustain? What should not be demanded of it? That is a mature question. Now let us go back to the circle. There are people who derive emotional meaning from being in a circle rather than from truly being known. That is dangerous because the circle can make you feel connected without requiring you to examine the quality of the connection. You feel included, so you assume that you are understood. You feel visible, so you assume that you are valued. You feel part of the environment, so you assume the people within it are automatically for you at depth. But inclusion is not the same as intimacy. Visibility is not the same as accurate valuation. Participation is not the same as relational safety. And this is why some people can feel deeply alone in very populated spaces. They are in the circle, but not deeply known. in the environment but not accurately held, surrounded but not stewarded. So again, a circle is not a covenant. Now let us examine the emotional error more directly. Many people give friendship level expectation to circle level relationships. They assume that because someone is constantly present, that the person should automatically respond with friend level understanding, friend level loyalty, or friend level care. But the relationship was never actually built to carry that expectation. This is where people say things like, I thought we were closer than that. I thought they were my friend. I thought they would understand. I thought being in the same space meant more. Sometimes those statements reveal real betrayal, but many times they reveal an unexamined assumption about what the circle actually meant. That is the harder truth, but it is often the more useful one. Because if you can identify the category error, you can stop repeating it. Now, let me add a crucial diagnostic question. What happens to the relationship when the shared environment is removed? That is one of the clearest tests. If the church setting changed, would the relationship still breathe? If the team dissolved, would the relationship still carry care? If the routine disappeared, would the relationship still hold? If the shared activity ended, would the connection still have substance? Those are useful questions because many relationships are sustained more by context than actual relational architecture. Again, that does not make them fake. It may simply mean they were situational. Situational is not the same as false. Seasonal is not the same as deceptive. Functional is not the same as fraudulent. Precision matters here. Otherwise, people become accusatory when what they were actually needing is discernment. Now, let us tie that back to identity and formation. This conversation is not only about social categories, it's also about internal architecture. If a person is not secure in their identity, they will often overread circles because circles offer quick emotional meaning. The circle makes them feel included, visible, connected, and therefore significant. But inclusion is not the same as deep relational recognition. This is why identity architecture matters here. When identity is being built well, a person becomes less likely to inflate contextual relationships simply to feel anchored. They become more capable of accurate naming, more capable of discerning what is actually present, more capable of appreciating the circle without depending on it to mean more than it does. That is maturity. It allows you to stop using external environment to tell you what every relationship means. And that is part of formation discipleship too. Formation is not merely about private morality. It is also about learning how to perceive relationships truthfully, how to avoid exaggeration, how to avoid relational sentimentality, how to avoid projecting depth onto what is still only repeated contact. That is a major part of becoming rightly formed. A well-formed person is less seduced by social atmosphere, less impressed by recurrence alone, less likely to overname a relationship because the setting feels warm, less likely to borrow significance from mere inclusion. Why? because their inner architecture is stronger than the emotional suggestion of circles. And that matters because where identity is weak, circles often become overburdened with meaning. People ask the environment to tell them who is safe, who is close, who is for them, who is their person, who is tribe, who is friend, who is covenant. But environments cannot do that work for you. Only discernment can. And discernment requires time, observation, testing, and humility. Now let me sharpen that further. One of the dangers of underformed identity is that it makes people confuse being around with belonging deeply. They can feel bonded to environments that have never truly bonded to them at the level that they imagined. Or they can elevate people too quickly because the context offers emotional reassurance. That is why inner formation must grow alongside relational intelligence. You need enough grounding to ask, what is actually here? What is the evidence? What has been demonstrated? What is this relationship capable of carrying? What am I projecting onto it because the environment feels meaningful? Those are not suspicious questions. They are mature ones. And it is part of greenfield thinking too, because greenfield thinking does not simply inherit relational assumptions from culture and traditions. It re-examines them. It asks, what is this really? What is its structure? What does it carry? What does it not carry? What belongs here? What should not be imposed here? That is wisdom. It is also freedom. Because a great deal of emotional exhaustion comes from expecting the wrong thing from the wrong category of relationship. Now let me move towards the close. Do not despise the circle. It has purpose. It introduces. It gathers. It exposes you to people, opportunities, conversations, and sometimes even future alignment. Do not over-interpret it. Do not assume every circle is your tribe. Do not assume every tribe is friendship. Do not assume every friendship is covenant. And do not assume shared setting is enough to establish shared depth. A circle may introduce the relationship, but it does not get to define it. The authority belongs to discernment, because the circle can gather people, but it cannot name them for you. Only pattern can do that. Only testing can do that. Only time can do that. Only clarity can do that. And many people would have protected their peace if they had stopped asking the environment to explain what only discernment can define. So learn the distinction. Some people are in your circle. Some are of your tribe. Some are your friends. And very few belong in the category of covenant. Confuse those categories, and disappointment will keep instructing you where discernment should have done the work first. Because every circle is not your tribe. Every tribe is not your friendship. And every friendship is not your covenant. A circle is proximity. A tribe is resonance. A friendship is stewardship. A covenant is weight. Learn the difference, and your peace will stop paying for your imprecision. That brings us to the end of part 3 of our series on relational intelligence. Circle is not covenant. Until the next time, keep building up in the wealth of the word.